Hi, I'm Bob Gimlin. My new friend Rio and I were discussing a complex topic, which he is convinced I can put into words better than he can. I humbly and happily accepted the challenge. The topic is that not since the very first upright primate has there been a single point in history where there has only been one other species of upright primate. Current scientific conjecture maintains that humans and our ancestors and cousins were a tangled mess up until the past few thousand years. Well, Rio and I think that's silly, to think that right now is the exception to the past 8 million years. And let me show you how I'm going to try and prove it. I could have used someone else's pre-made human family tree and saved myself a lot of time, but I made my own for a couple reasons. First is simply copyright. I try very hard to respect copyright laws in hopes that I'll be treated the same way. The second reason I made my own chart is that there are various ways to physically represent this almost insurmountable quantity of data, and I have chosen the representation that is in the middle of the road. It expresses the information accurately, yet in a way that is still comprehensible, without a magnifying glass and a bunch of Vicodin. Keep in mind that subjects higher up are more recent, and the farther to the right the subjects are, the more human-like they are. That being said, let's get started. About 6.5 million years ago, a primate genus called Pan troglodytes began. The fossil record, as well as the sequencing of the human genome, indicates that all the hominin, in fact, diverged from Pan lineage. First would be Ardipithecus. At about 5.5 million years ago, Saphenthropus came first and disappeared from the record first, around 4.5 million years ago. Then you have Aurorhyntogensis, then Ardipithecus cadava, and the most advanced, Ardipithecus ramidus. The last fossil of Ardipithecus is roughly 4 million years old. Then you have the Australopithecus groups. All things considered, they did exceedingly well because they lasted for so long unchanged. Australopithecus immensis came first, a bit before 5 million years ago. Then came Austroafarensis. Then Austroafricanus and Austrogari lasted all the way until a mere 2 million years ago. And remember, the farther to the right the subject is, the more human-like it is. Then we have the Paranthropus group, which began as recently as 2 million years ago. Paranthropus aethiopicus came first. Its fossil record runs dry as early as 1.5 million years ago. Then Paranthropus robustus and Paranthropus boisei, fossils end a little over 1 million years ago. Then we have the group Homo, or the true humans. As you can see, early Homo obviously overlaps with the Australopithecus and Paranthropus. Earliest was Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis, followed in longevity by Homo erectus, and then, just within a few mere thousand years before today, we have Heidelbergensis, Neanderthal man, and H. flores, affectionately referred to as the human hobbit. And then last but not least, we have you and I, Homo sapiens. I think it is worth mentioning, those millimeter differences on the top of this chart would be considered negligible 5 million years ago, but I guess not in modern times. Here and here are interesting because it shows area of considerable overlap of different species as well as genus. This pink star, what I tried to make into a pink star, represents now, though it should have the same circumference as a piece of thread. But then you wouldn't be able to see it. Mainstream science does not deny that this fossil record is woefully incomplete. All the data you're seeing is a representation of less than 100 fossils, and clearly, these animals were prolific. We're talking one fossil for every, say, 100,000, 10,000, 20,000 animals that actually existed, which means we're missing an awful lot. So let's throw in a couple more species of Australopithecus, a few more Paranthropus, maybe 4 more Ardipithecus, and a couple more true humans. Fossils can be dated fairly accurately, up to about 100,000 years give or take, but that doesn't mean that that is when the species went extinct. Not even close. If for every 10,000 animals we have less than one fossil, then we really have no idea when those animals actually went extinct. This graph represents the last fossil, not the last animal, so let's just skew it by 500,000 years or so, give or take. Because we don't know everything, and accepting a margin of error is very important, especially in cases like this. And to be perfectly clear, this is just hominin, hominin being defined as divergence from Pan, or chimpanzees. A few million years before Pan, we had Ponginae, survived today by the orangutan. Ponginae once had Sylviopithecus, Gigantopithecus, Lufangopithecus, and Ancarapithecus, all of which are theoretically extinct. Then of course, let's not forget Gorilla gorillae. We haven't found any divergences from gorilla, but no one doubts that there were some, so I'll throw in a few of those. Then of course my personal favorite candidate is Dryopithecus, whose fossil record ran dry less than 1 million years ago, a negligible amount of time, when you're talking about this kind of scale. I think it is worth mentioning that Drio was by far the first to leave Africa, so I think they got to North America first, and began to adapt, isolated, and differently from other apes, much like how the lemur is unique and only found on the island of Madagascar. And though the great apes are not exactly morphologically closest to humans, they have a tendency to last much longer than humans and human ancestors like Australopithecus and Paranthropus. And by the way, I think Bigfoot is a divergence of Drio, not Drio itself. There's an old saying about survival in Canadian winter. They say that when you think you have enough wood for the night, multiply it by 10. That's how I feel about the origin of man and primates. If this looks like enough to you, times it by 10. Because it is widely accepted that we've only found a very small fraction of what there actually is to find. And as I mentioned earlier, we only find one fossil for every 10 to 50,000 animals that existed. And I don't even know if there are 50,000 Bigfoots alive. So the chances of finding one are, again, negligible. And this chart represents tens of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of individual animals. And this whole chart has been extrapolated from only about 110 fossils. And serious inquiry on this subject has only been around for about 50 years. Realistically, and honestly, if this chart was complete, you would see very little to no white. And remember that pink dot? Are we really supposed to believe that the only part of primate history wherein humans are the sole bipeds happens to be the only part of history where there can't be fossils because the time is too recent? Really think about it. There cannot be fossils from now because fossils are very old. The tangled, thorny bush of human ancestry all of a sudden becomes a flagpole just because it happens to be today? Come on. That's seriously world is flat type thinking. I know this is just a sadly incomplete chart, but it represents a fundamental truth about humanity, and that truth is that humans may define humanity, and yet we are not and never have been the sole member of that group which we try to define. So Rio, I hope I did your topic justice. I look forward to further collaboration down the road, and let me know what kind of cologne you're using, because someone at the way top of this graph sure seems to like it.